Good day, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of the Mahabharata as is podcast. This podcast explores each and every chapter of the Mahabharata text, which is the biggest epic in human history. In this episode, we will discuss the fifth section of the Mahabharata story. This section is titled Astika Parva and is part of the larger Adi Parva. Astika Parva is one of the longest parvas, and therefore I will cover this across multiple episodes. This episode covers part 1 of the Astika Parva. Mahabharata text is divided into main parvas or volumes and sub-parvas or sections. Each main parva has many sub-parvas, just as each volume of a book can have many sections. Please see episode description to understand the classification in more detail. And finally, depending upon the platform where you are listening to this podcast, please feel free to leave me a comment, question, or feedback. Alternatively, you can drop me an email at mahabharataasas@outlook.com. Please like, subscribe, and share if you find this podcast useful. In episode 5, Soti narrates to Shonuka the story of Bhrigu lineage. He stops when Ruru is told by a newly transformed Rishi Sahasrapath about the snake sacrifice organized by King Janamejaya. The Rishi mentions that at the snake sacrifice, a sage by the name of Astika intervenes to rescue some of the snakes. In this parva, sage Shonuka expresses his interest in knowing more about sage Astika and King Janamejaya. Who were these two gentlemen? Why didn't King Janamejaya organize the snake sacrifice? Who was sage Astika? As this parva unfolds, story after story is told. At first, they appear unconnected, but Soti, an excellent storyteller, will connect these dots. So let's first hear the story of sage Astika. A wise sage was once traveling through the forest when he saw some people hung upside down in a cave. Their legs were tied through the rope made of grass and fitted onto the ceiling of the cave. The sage was surprised. He inquired those people as to why they were hanging upside down. The hanging men replied, in a fragile tone, that they are sages, and because they do not have any descendants, they want to descend into the earth. When inquired as to why they are doing such a strange act, the sages respond that they have a descendant who is also a sage. His name is Jaratkaru. However, he has taken a vow of celibacy. This means that he would not marry and have any children. This also means that their lineage would not continue. The visiting sage is a bit upset hearing this. The hanging sages notice the expression and inquire him as to why he is feeling sad about the condition of a few strangers. He responds that he is filled with guilt because he is Jaratkaru himself, the descendant of the hanging sages and the one who apparently is responsible for their distress. Please tell me, what do you want me to do so you are satisfied? Jaratkaru asks his ancestors. The hanging sages look at each other. They persuade Jaratkaru to get married and have children, reasoning that the yogic powers do not fully render fruits until they are passed on to one's offspring. Jaratkaru hears, but is depressed. What about my vow of celibacy, he thinks. But he is a Brahmin, and compassion comes as a second nature to him. He agrees to get married, but only on a condition that the name of his wife is also Jaratkaru, same as his own name. He explains to his ancestors that his miserable financial condition is such that no father would marry her daughter to him. However, he would try his best to find a wife for himself, even if it means that he had to go and beg for one. And so he does. He goes from village to village to beg for a wife. But he was right. Who would marry their daughter to a beggar? He does not give up though. One day, as he is begging in a forest, a giant snake-like creature appears before him, a Naga. Identifying himself as Vasuki, the king of Nagas, he offers his sister to the begging Brahmin. Jaratkaru refuses for the first time, but then out of curiosity, asks Vasuki the name of his sister. Her name is Jaratkaru, Vasuki replies. Jaratkaru wanted to say something, but is interrupted by Vasuki. Vasuki explains that his sister was destined to be Jaratkaru's wife. In the past, the Nagas were cursed by their mother that they would burn in a snake sacrifice which would be organized by King Janamejaya. The time is nearing and only you can redeem us, says Vasuki. Jaratkaru has no reason to doubt Vasuki, so he agrees to his proposal. And finally the day arrives. Jaratkaru the sage marries Jaratkaru, the Naga princess. The couple give birth to a magnificent son, proficient in the knowledge of Vedas, a righteous, compassionate and truthful Brahmin, the one who grows up to be known as the great sage Astika. When the time arrives for the King Janamejaya sacrifice, Astika rushes to the sacrificial ceremony and saves many of the Nagas, who were now his relatives from his mother's side. Soti stops narrating the story here. He was perhaps thinking that Shonuka just wanted to get a glimpse of who Astika was, and that's it. But instead, his host is interested in detail. He asks Soti to narrate the whole story once again in detail. Soti complies. We will now hear the detailed account of sage Astika and many stories connected to it, tributaries to the mighty river of stories that Soti has to tell. Prajapati Daksh had two daughters by the name of Kadru and Vinata. Both are married to a great and well-known sage, Rishi Kashyap. They both loved and worshipped their sage husband. Pleased Rishi decides to grant a boon to each one of them as a reward for their loyalty and devotion to their husband. When time comes, Kadru expresses her desire to be known as the mother of 1,000 Nagas, all equally mighty and fierce. Vinata, on hearing what her sister has asked for, requires only 2 sons, each having power just more than the combined might of the Kadru's 1,000 Naga sons. Kashyap agrees and blesses them with their desired boons. Take care of the embryo, he remarks before leaving for forest to resume his spiritual meditation. When the time comes, Kadru gives birth to 1,000 eggs and Vinata to 2 eggs. The eggs are kept in separate vessels, appropriately warmed up and filled with special herbs to allow the babies inside to form. 500 years pass. 1,000 Nagas are born to Kadru, but Vinata's eggs hardly register a moment. Driven by impatience and jealousy, she breaks open one of the eggs. Vinata, a mother, is torn apart to see her half-grown baby inside. Lower part of his body has not yet formed. Whatever the baby's condition, he was not ordinary. Born to Kashyap, and that too through such a powerful boon, he withstands the trauma of being deprived of life by his own mother. Not fully formed, he only has limited time. And in that limited time, the enraged baby at the brink of his death shouts a curse to his mother. In your impatience and jealousy, you have deprived me of my existence, that which was slowly coming to life for last 500 years. I curse you, O mother, that for the equal period of 500 years, you shall become a slave of the very woman who you were trying to compete with, your own sister. But please don't do this to your other egg, else he will also be deformed like me. How many breaths can you count as you say these words? This was the lifespan of the poor soul. When the time was right, the second egg breaks itself open. This time, Vinata remains patient. Take care of the embryo. She recalls last words from her husband, sage Kashyap. From the second egg rises a mighty creature, king of birds, enemy of Nagas, the mighty Garuda. Time passes. One day the two sisters were wandering in the nearby plains when they noticed a magnificent horse coming towards them. It was no ordinary horse, but the one born from the churning of the ocean, the one that was conducted by the gods and demons in search for Amrit, or nectar of immortality. Sati is interrupted here. Shonuka, as soon as he hears the churning of the ocean, now wants to know its details. Who conducted it? Where was it conducted? What happened? Sati, in compliance, will now narrate the story of churning of the ocean. The great gods were inspired by the Lord Vishnu to undertake this mighty venture of churning the ocean. It was at the great Mount Meru that this decision was taken. Sati narrates the beauty of the Mount Meru. When calculations were made, it was noted that a giant churning rod of the size of a mountain will be needed for the venture. The only available option was Mount Manda, a mountain with a peak as high as 11,000 yojanas, with one yojan equal to approximately 15 kilometers. Uprooting this mountain and installing it in the middle of the ocean was no ordinary feat. All the gods failed to uproot the mountain, even with their combined strength. They therefore requested Lord Vishnu for help. The mighty Lord agreed. The gods now went to seek the permission from the ocean itself. After all, the churning would crush the ocean waters. The Lord of the Oceans agreed, provided he also gets his share of the discoveries. Now the question was, where to install Mount Mandar itself? Ocean is far too deep even for the giant of the mountains like Mount Manda. So the gods now seek help of Akupara, the lord of tortoises, who readily agrees. On the set date, the mighty Lord Vishnu uproots Mount Mandar and installs it on the back of Akupara. Naga King Vasuki wraps itself around the mountain like a giant rope wrapped around the churning rod. The side from the head is held by demons. The side from the tail is held by gods. In other words, the Naga acts like a rope, which both the gods and the demons must now pull, each in turn, to begin the churning. And so it begins. It was a sight to behold. As the mountain is moved with great force, various trees and other plant life is uprooted and falls into the ocean from each of its two sides. Many creatures are destroyed, and their screams echo in the atmosphere. Being pulled from each direction, Vasuki gives off giant plumes of fire and smoke that fill the sky, forming dark clouds. The clouds erupt torrents of water, soothing those performing the hard labor underneath. The ocean appears like a giant whirlpool, its salty water and accumulations turning stark white. The crushing pressures of Mount Mandar destroy many ocean creatures, but their screams never make it to the surface. Mount Mandar continues to shade its trees and other vegetation. In that are many invaluable herbs that fall into the ocean and are churned and mixed with the fast-moving water. The water thickens like milk and then like butter. It is at this point that the gods give up. They have no strength left in them. Then the Lord Vishnu appears and revives their energy. The churning continues once again. Many invaluable jewels arose from the churning that was shared between the gods and the demons. and those also included the horse that Sati mentioned just before he was interrupted. The last item that came out of the churning was a pot of nectar carried by god Dhanvantri. The massively tedious undertaking as ocean churning finally bore its fruits. Immortality had arrived, just a few steps away. But then, with a loud roar, a giant demon snatched the pots away from the gods. Demons now claimed sole ownership over the nectar of immortality. This transgression was not acceptable to the gods. Lord Vishnu was furious. He assumed the form of a woman with a beauty never seen before. He, or she as now he was, tricked the demons into handing over the pot to her. Without a moment's delay, she passed the pot on to the gods. Demons were confused. They rushed to assemble the best of their weapons to face the gods. But it was too late. The gods, having now drank the nectar of immortality, were rejoicing. First Indra, then Agni, then Sun, then Moon, one after the other, the gods were becoming immortal. Last one was God Budh, the Mercury god, who had just had his share of the nectar. It was still in his mouth when the Sun and the Moon gods spoke up. "He's no god, but a demon disguised as God." And so he was, the demon Rahu. The nectar had just reached his throat when Lord Vishnu gave up his female form and hurled his all-powerful Sudarshan Chakra at Rahu, chopping his head off. But it was too late. The demon was already immortal. With his head cut, he sowed lifelong enmity with the sun and the moon. Rest of the demons are back by now, all laced with spears, swords, maces, and shields, ready to strike. The gods take their positions. Perhaps no one remembers that the gods are now immortal. No announcements, no talks, no negotiations. The battle between the gods and the demons begins. Gods throw their most powerful weapons towards demons, slicing their limbs. Their spears pierce through their giant bodies, giving off streaks of blood. Their maces crush their heads and break their ribs. In no time, hundreds of demons lay dead, but the battle continues to rage. Things were just about to get worse for the demons when Lord Vishnu, the Narayan, enters the battle along with Lord Nar. As soon as Lord Vishnu enters the battlefield, he summons his Sudarshan Chakra once again. With a loud thunder, the sky goes red. A giant disk is forming, slowly descending towards Vishnu's raised finger. Sudarshan appears with all its might, impatiently waiting for the signal. The wait is over. Lord Vishnu throws Sudarshan towards the demons. It rains fire, reducing the hordes of demons to ashes. Other hordes are electrified and turned to dust. Then it multiplies itself and carelessly slices through the giant bodies of the leftover demons. Sudarshan is everywhere and is killing in hundreds. Demons, however, do not give up. Through their magical power, they rise very high up in the sky and throw large stones at the gods. From that height, if the stones ever reached on the ground, the gods would surely suffer fatal injuries. Stones are hurled. They are on their way. The gods look up. They will strike them any time now. But they're destroyed mid-air, reduced to fine dust. When the dust clears, Lord Indra sees handsome Lord Nar with his magnificent bow. He just saved the gods. Demons have done all their tricks, but none has worked, and they have lost the battle. The gods thank Lord Vishnu and Lord Nar for their assistance during the undertaking, including the final battle, and all depart to their respective abodes. Interesting, says Shonuka. This was a great story, Sati, but you were talking about a horse when I interrupted you. Sati complies and gets back to the story of Kadru and Venata. Kadru and Vinata, the wives of the great sage Kashyap, once see that magnificent horse. On a lighter note, Kadru asks Vinata to guess the color of the horse's tail. It was quite obvious though. A white horse would likely have a white tail, so Vinata replied that it should be white. Kadru, however, thought it was black, so she proposes a wager. Whoever loses will be the slave of the winner for next 500 years. Vinata agrees. The white horse will likely have a white tail, so she should win the wager. This abrupt agreement and confidence of Vinata puts Kadru in a bit of a doubt. What if the horse's tail is in fact white? I do not want to be a slave of my own sister, she thinks to herself. In order to ensure that she wins the wager, she asks her 1,000 Naga sons to use their illusory power and turn the horse's tail to pitch black. Nagas refuse to comply. Why? Soti doesn't tell us. Kadru is enraged at her disobedient sons. You fools! How dare you refuse your mother? I curse you all. One day a great king Janamejaya will organize a snake sacrifice and you will be put to fire. A mother just cursed her 1,000 sons to death by fire. Shouting the curse, Kadru leaves immediately to see her sister Vinata. Let's go and see who won the wager, she says. Vinata gets up and both leave to see the horse, who is now on the other side of a mighty ocean. The beauty of that ocean is mesmerizing, says Soti. He spends several minutes just talking about the ocean. Once he is finished, he says, the two sisters with their yogic power cross over that mighty ocean to see the horse. Well, actually just its tail. Black or white? Likely white for a white horse, but no. It was actually black. Vinata loses the wager. The curse of her firstborn comes true. From now on, she is the slave of her own sister Kadru for next 500 years. But she also has another son, the king of the birds, the enemy of the Nagas, the mighty Garuda. When he was born, he rose high up in the sky, immense in size, his wings like clouds, that flap like thunder. He blazed like fire, and his very presence would freeze the enemies. 1,000,000 Nagas are no match for him, let alone just the 1,000 sons of Kadru. Hearing his mother's loss at the wager, he flies to the other side of the ocean to see her. Vinata is torn apart by grief. She has lost her freedom for a very long time. But she is also relieved to see her mighty son. One day, when she is free of all the bonds, she will have her vengeance, she thinks to herself. Garuda is depressed, seeing his mother in such a sorry state. But he knows he has to hold back his anger, at least for some time. Take me to the island of Nagas, Kadru shouts in order at Vinata, and ask your bird to carry my Naga sons. Put him to good use. Kadru continues, looking at Garuda. The group departs. Kadru travels with Vinata and Garuda carries the Nagas on his back and flies above the ocean. He flies high up in the sky where sun's rays are brutal. The high exposure to heat begins to scorch the Nagas. Vinata giggles. I told ya, one day I'll have my vengeance, she thinks. But that day was not today. Kadru begins a long prayer to Lord Indra for help. After all, the Lord commands the clouds. Indra has no choice. She was wife of Kashyap, who was calling on him. He orders his clouds to shower over the traveling group, soothing the scorched Nagas. They continue to travel with clouds over them, and the group finally lands on the Naga island. The beauty of the island was breathtaking. Surrounded by ocean water, the eternal serenity of the place, occasionally disturbed by the ocean waves, was creating a deep meditative music. The rich vegetation added to the serenity by rendering a soul-comforting aroma. It was Naga land, and all of the Naga sons of Kadru fell in love with the place. They stayed there for many months. "O giant bird, you are the ruler of the sky. You must have seen many more places like this," said one of the Naga brothers. "Can you take us to more similar islands?" Garuda was grieving the sorry state of his mother. He just wanted this to be over. As if not interested in the question, he simply asked, "What do you guys need to set my mother free? Quote your price and consider it done." The Nagas giggled. They were already in a place which is a heaven on earth. All they were missing was immortality. "We want the nectar of immortality," the Nagas said. "Bring it to us and the freedom is yours." "These fools now want the nectar of immortality," Garuda told his mother. "I shall bring it to them and win your freedom." The nectar, however, is long way away, and Garuda will have to travel yojanas of distance to lay his hands on it, so he must eat. Vinata looks pleased that her son has resolved to take her freedom back. She blesses him with good fortune and says that he can feast on nishadas and can eat as many of them as he wants, but he needs to be careful. There are many Brahmins who live amongst the Nishada tribe. Whatever happens, do not lay your hands on the Brahmins. If you eat them, they will burn through your body like a burning coal, Vinata says to Garuda. "I will engage myself in ceaseless prayer until your safe return. But remember, never harm a Brahmin." In a remote part of the island, a man is hiding behind the trees with a bow loaded with an arrow, pointing to a wild boar. Perhaps it was his dinner for tonight. He knows the weak spot and pulls the string carefully, trying not to move and alert the boar. He's just about to shoot when a loud thunder fills the sky. The sky goes dark. It appears as if a large cloud has descended upon the island. With every passing moment, the sound was getting louder and louder. And then he sees a giant bird descending from the sky, one like never seen before. Garuda has come for his dinner. As he grounds himself, with his wings flapping, the wind from his wings creates a giant dust storm that blinds the running and panicking Nishadas. They begin to run in the other direction, unknown to the fact that they are running straight into the mouth of Garuda, the king of birds, the enemy of Nagas. But then Garuda is agitated. His throat feels as if he has eaten a burning coal. He screams in pain and agony. "Please come out, please come out," says the king of birds, the enemy of Nagas, the son of Vinata. We will continue the story of Garuda and remainder of the Astika Parva in next episode. As said before, this Parva is one of the longest Parvas, and therefore I have split this across multiple episodes. I had said in the last episode that the last segment of every episode will be for discussion on feedback and questions. But then a few listeners said that the story should continue uninterrupted, and perhaps then for questions we can have an altogether separate episode. I actually like this suggestion, so we'll continue to accumulate your questions and answer them in one go in a dedicated episode. But yes, thank you so much for your feedback. It is extremely appreciated, and please do send your questions. With that, we will end this episode here. In next episode, we will continue discussion on Astika Parva. Until then, goodbye and take care.